So I have no idea what time it was, but it was extremely late at night. But I remember being woken up to a very violent push into my tent. My name is Kathryn. I am from Puyallup, born and raised. I was never a believer. I never thought about it, never crossed my mind. I've heard people talk and joke and so on and so forth, but, always wrote it off. Well, I've spent a lot of time throughout my life outdoors camping. My family did a lot of primitive rendezvous camping, um, but I've never encountered anything. Well, fast forward into my early 20s, with my partner at the time, I went camping at Bumping Lake. And once again, not a believer, not thinking about it at the time. So if you're going to Bumping Lake, there's like a bridge that you cross to go into like the main camping area. Well, before that, there's a Forest Service road that veers off, and we went down that. And I'm not entirely sure how far, but it was pretty far down that road. And we were trying really hard to not be around anyone else. We wanted seclusion, privacy. So it was me, my partner at the time, and then 2 other friends. And my 2 other friends were very familiar with that area, and they wanted to take us. So we went camping there. Everything was great. And I had driven, so the 4 of us were in my car, so it was just one vehicle. And my vehicle was, I'm not very good at measuring distance, but it was a decent amount away. Visual from camp, but so I kept feeling like I was being watched the entire trip. And I kept having to go to my car throughout the day to grab things, and I just felt extremely uncomfortable. My partner, my friends would be off doing whatever, like hiking throughout the woods and stuff, and I would just stay back at camp, and I just felt incredibly uncomfortable. And I love the outdoors. I love the outdoors, and I usually don't feel that way. But it got to the point where I did not want to go to my vehicle. I just wanted to stay at camp, and it was broad daylight, beautiful weather. And so that was happening. Well, fast forward a little bit, we were just there for a weekend, but it was the last night that we were there, and we were sitting around a fire. Things were fine. We weren't playing loud music or anything of that sort. We were just hanging out, talking. And I think it was maybe like 11 o'clock at night, if I had to guess, but we started hearing, I'll never forget it, but I don't know how to explain the noise. It was like a cross between like a toucan and a monkey. And I really hate to say monkey, but that's kind of what it sounded like. But it wasn't just one, it was multiple. And it was getting closer and louder because there was a very thick set of woods behind my car. And anyways, it was very uncomfortable. It was getting louder, closer. It was one of those, we all kind of looked at each other, didn't understand what was going on, but we knew we needed to just go to bed, and we all agreed as soon as first light hit, we were packing up and going. Well, and I couldn't sleep. I laid in my tent, and I felt like I was being watched through my tent. It was just incredibly uncomfortable. So we leave, a couple days pass, and then my friends had come over to my house, those same friends, and we were talking. And they're like, oh yeah, you know about Sasquatch. And I was like, no, that was Sasquatch? And then that whole experience is what sent me down the rabbit hole. Doing some researching, I have a very dear friend who, she has had some crazy experiences of her own. She used to work in the woods for a long time. And so I was able to confide in her and talk with her. And if I didn't have her, I don't know where I would be, but she helped me a lot with just figuring out what I was feeling and everything. So fast forward a little bit from that first experience. I have a camping spot that I've been going to for well over a decade now. Um, it is east of the Cascades. Um, but I've been going there for a very long time. I had a very dear friend show me where that is at. Uh, so it started out just going camping, not thinking too much of Sasquatch. So, because I only had that one experience at Bumping Lake, so I'm just like, okay. But I had gone with some friends who one of them was very much into Sasquatch. I don't think he had had any experiences, but he was just very interested. And so we went out. I think it was 4th of July weekend, actually. But this area ended up being extraordinarily packed. I think that was the first time I had ever seen it so packed. And it kind of made me sad. But anyway, so we went, we kind of found this like one of the very last little camping spots you could get. And there was this kind of like huge tall ridge on off to the side of us. And um late that night, that first night, we had gone up to the bridge and kind of just, we had found a way to hike up to it. And we just had sat on a stump in the middle of the night. We were just hanging out kind of quietly, just seeing what we could hear. And my friend heard growling behind him. Well, he was like, I don't know what that was. I'm not entirely sure, but I know one thing, and we need to go back to camp. So we're navigating with our flashlights, trying to get down this ridge safely. We go back to camp and we kind of hung out for a little bit longer, but then we went to bed. Well, apparently that night, that same friend had left a recorder on in his tent for, I think it went on for like 2 hours, but he was having little rocks thrown at his tent consistently for, I think he said it went on for about 45 minutes and then it stopped. But that was happening. And there was no tree above his tent or anything where something could have been falling. There was no rain or anything. But that second night, I was laying in my tent and I remember I couldn't really sleep. I felt like I was being watched again. And all I could think was, okay, here we go. And I remember I was just laying there and I started having tears coming out of my eyes for some reason. But I could hear in the distance. So there's a camp, right? But then there's this ridge. But then off to the other side of us, there's a ridge going down, and then there's the river. And no one can get down there. It is, I don't know how you could get down there. It's just so steep, and there's no trails. It's, yeah. So, but I kept hearing two individuals talking, but it was not in a language that I recognized or that I could um, explain or reenact. But I just remember tearing up, not because I was sad or anything, but just because I was like in awe in a way, if that makes sense. And it's like they were laughing. It's like they knew that I could hear them. And it's like they knew how I was feeling, but they were laughing at how I was feeling, if that makes, I don't know. It was such a weird experience. Oh, and the last thing that happened with that trip was, so up on that ridge we were at, we had seen an orb. Now, at the time, I didn't know what orbs were. I had no idea what any of this was. This was still new into my whole journey. And my friend, though, did know. And he was like, oh, that looks like an orb. And I was like, what is an orb? I have no idea what this is. What are you talking about? So he had to explain it to me. But then we went back up there and there was nobody there. There was no one there because we thought, oh, maybe it's someone with a flashlight. But it was kind of a bluish color, which you could have a blue flashlight, but I don't know, it was too big and the way it moved, because it was kind of bouncing a little bit, but then it was like straight and it would stop. Fast forward a couple more years, probably about 3 years ago now, 2022, 2023 maybe, we had gone camping. So I always try to go during the week because this place usually gets too crowded, but I like to go during the week because there's very few people. But now I'm at the point where I'm starting to bring fruit and things because I want to be respectful. I want to offer something for them letting us come and visit. So I would always try to find a stump or a big rock or something that just kind of like speaks to me in a way where I'm like, this is a good spot to leave something for them. So I think I had brought some peaches. I try to bring things that, like we have a lot of apples. I try not to bring apples too much, but like peaches, things like that are harder for them to get. And I would leave it, and then I would just kind of like say in my head, thank you for letting me be in this space. Thank you for letting my friends be in this space. We're going to do everything we can to leave it better than how we found it. So, we ended up, so we were in this huge open, like almost football field open area, and it was just us in this area. And we bring water filters and stuff so we can like go and get our own water and filter it. We all kind of felt like we were being watched a little bit, but wrote it off. The last night that we were there, I remember I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was being watched. My dog, he's a bit older. I think he was like 15 or 16 at the time. He was acting really weird. And I remember having to get up in the middle of the night. I think I had to go grab water or something. And it was just where like the sun had just barely started to come out. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable. I didn't want to get out of my tent. I know my dog really did not want to get out of my tent. But I knew he should probably try and go to the bathroom. So I was like, okay, no, it's okay. He's really small. So I just picked him up and I took him over to let him go use the restroom. Well, I remember once again feeling like I'm being watched, and instinctually, so we're kind of towards this end side of the football field area, and I turn to my right, and there's just one singular, very skinny tree, just one lone tree in this field. And I turn to my right, and I see the tree, but I see one peeking out. And I'm like, all I could think was, how are you fitting behind that skinny tree? That's all my brain could think. But then also I'm like, all my friends are asleep right now. And I just felt, I didn't feel fear, but I felt just so, I don't know, weird in a way, because I knew all the experiences that I had, but then I saw one and my brain, I was like, okay, you haven't really been sleeping this last night. Maybe you're just really tired. So I looked down at my dog and then I looked back up and I'm like shaking right now. I remember looking back up and they're still staring at me. I don't know if it was a he or she, I'm not sure, but they were just kind of peeking out at me still. And I just stared for a moment and just completely trying to make sense of it. And then finally my dog was ready and I went to go swoop him back up and I look back up and they're gone. And I'm like, how? Because that tree was just so, I don't know. I can't make sense of it. Fast forward to the next year, going to that same area, not too far from that particular camping spot. But I made it very clear to my friends. I said, that little area, let's not go camp in that area. I feel like that, because it's at the very end of this Forest Service road near the river that I felt because there's a mountain. And I know in my heart and soul that up at near the top of that mountain is where they reside. I can't prove it, but I feel it because I always stare up at there and I just know that that's where they stay. They have a good lookout of everything and they come down, they get water, I feel that's where their path is. So I'm like, we're going to respect that area, but we can, kind of camp away from that just a little bit. Well, that next year, quite a bit happened. I remember we had some other friends that had joined into the group and camped with us. And I think it was our second night into this trip. This family had come in really late to come camping. And so remember, that year before I was at the end. Well, we're kind of like just a little bit over from that. But then there's that road that leads into that one area we were at. Well, it forks and it starts to go up the mountain. Well, there's just a little tiny carved out spot where this family came in probably about like past midnight and they were setting up and we had gone to bed, but I was still awake and my friend, her boyfriend, now husband, he was still awake apparently. I didn't know this though. I thought I was the only one awake. So we start hearing this little girl screaming in the woods. Um, it was extraordinarily terrifying, to say the least. This happened for about 30, maybe 40 minutes. And the best way I can explain where we were at was, so we're in this little area right off that Forest Service road. Well, on that other side of the road, there's just thick brush. And it kind of starts to be a little steep. There's like a little mini ridge there, but it's so thick, there's no trails in there at all. I don't know if you could even try and walk in there. It's so, yeah, so overgrown and everything. Let alone a little girl who I found out that next day she was 2. She's 2 years old. So going back to that, I'm hearing this girl screaming. And then I hear the family saying, Sarah, Sarah, just yelling for her, trying to find her. And you hear this little girl over here screaming. Next thing you know, like not even a couple seconds go by, she's over here in this thick brush. I still tried to make sense of it, where I'm like, how can this little girl, there's just no way. There's no way. And all I could think, the only thing my brain could think of was maybe she had wandered off while they were setting up, and maybe perhaps a Sasquatch, can't prove it, don't know, but perhaps a Sasquatch was nearby, noticed this little girl wandering off, and was trying to help get her back, but without being noticed. But anytime the family got too close, it was like they were trying to navigate her back but not be noticed, if that makes sense. That's the best way I can think of it. But this happened for so long. It felt for like forever. Maybe it wasn't 30 or 40 minutes. Maybe it was 20. I don't know. I wasn't looking at my clock. All I could think was, do I need to go out there and look? But something in my gut was like, no, you need to stay in your tent. You know, just keep listening, making sure, you know, the family's still looking. Things end up being okay. But my friend, so my friend gets out of the tent, the friend that was awake, and he says, hey, are you guys awake? And my friend that was staying in my tent, she was asleep, but I was like, yeah, I'm awake. Did you hear all of that? And he was like, yeah, thank God I'm not the only one. And so I got out and I was talking to him for a little bit, because we were shaking. We were shaking. And, you know, he had walked over and he was like, hey, you know, were you guys able to find your daughter? Is everything okay? And they were like, yeah, she just somehow wandered off into the shrubbery. And we are like, we have no idea what was going on, or like, you know, they couldn't make sense of it either. But thank goodness, you know, she ended up being back with them. But yeah, so that was, to this day, we still talk about it, and we're just like, we can't explain what exactly happened there. Last year, we had camped kind of along the river, not in that area. I was like, okay, let's just try a different spot again. Let's go to a different spot. So I wanted to be closer to the river. And I remember that first night we had gotten there, I was alone in my tent with my dog. And then my 2 friends, they were in the tent next to me with their dogs, and they were asleep. I was still awake, just laying there. Eventually, I kind of said in my head, because I didn't get the chance to go out that day to go set out my stuff. I planned on doing it the next day, to my offering for them. But I did lay down that night before I fell asleep, and I was like, hello, we're here. You know, I have things for you. I'm going to place them out for you tomorrow. You know, just saying my usual, like, thank you for letting us be in your space. Fall asleep. So I have no idea what time it was, but it was extremely late at night. But I remember being woken up to a very violent push into my tent. And I'm sleeping on a mat on the ground. I'm not on a cot or anything like that. I'm on the ground. So it was kind of like right, just enough where I felt it against me. But it was, I tried to reenact it the next day for my friends, and I couldn't. But it was a very violent push. But I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move. I was like petrified, but not of my own accord. It felt like I was being kind of controlled. I don't like saying controlled, but that's the best way I can explain it. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move. I had my leg in this very uncomfortable kind of like position. I really wanted to move it because of how uncomfortable it was, but I couldn't. But I remember, so a lot of things had happened in this very split second, right? So the push happened, couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes. But I remember hearing in my head, don't move, don't open your eyes, you're okay. But all that's happening. And I remember having this vision at the same time of something pushing in my tent and trying to grab my leg. I, I don't know. It was bizarre. And honestly, I don't usually get scared in these instances, but this one terrified me for some reason. So that had happened, and I had heard and felt, because I was on the ground, heavy footsteps running away. Heavy. And um I also had smelled this horrible smell. Like, for the lack, I don't know how else to explain it, but it smelled like death. Just a horrible, horrible smell. Um, so there was the smell, the steps, and then I couldn't open my eyes for a little bit still, but I eventually was able to open my eyes, and I looked over to make sure my dog was still there, everything was good. He hadn't moved. He was still sleeping. So I was like, okay. Where we had camped, it was right along the river, but it was kind of, there's like a slope of rocks, right? And no one can really walk on that without making a noise. You would have heard the shuffling of the rocks and stuff. And my tent was so close to that ridge that it would have been very hard. It wasn't a very clear walkable path between my tent and that little ridge, if that makes sense. Um, so I don't know. That next morning, I tried to go out, see if there are footprints, anything. Not even just Sasquatch, but just a bear. Because I was really trying to think, like, was it just something that happened to be going by somehow, pushed in my tent, like fell? I don't know. I have no idea. But I remember laying there that night, and that after that had happened, I was still laying there, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I remember staring at the moon and just hoping for the sun to come up. That's all. I was just laying there and laying there, and I'm just hoping for the sun to come up so I could go out of my tent. And I remember my friends had woken up, and I had gone out, and I was just trying so hard not to cry. I was walking around my tent, looking at everything, trying to see if there was any kind of marks or anything on my tent. Nothing. And finally, my friend says, "Are you okay?" And then I just tell her everything, and I'm crying, and I'm like, I have no idea what happened to me last night, but I don't think I can sleep in my tent by myself tonight. Can I, move my mat and sleep on the floor of your guys' tent tonight? She's like, yeah, absolutely. So I had gone to town though that day because my dear friend, I had to call her. While it was fresh in my memory, I had to talk to her. She's the one that has so much experience and is very knowledgeable. And I was talking to her, and she was like, it probably was a juvenile that just decided to mess with you. And I was like, I was kind of thinking the same thing, honestly. She was like, yeah, because they usually wouldn't want to do that. It's not usually their thing, but juveniles really like to mess around. I was like, okay, yes, this makes sense. The night after that, I went back in my tent, and I just remember laying there and thinking, okay, I know you wanted to mess with me. You let me know you're here. I know I've known that you're here, but I really would like to get some sleep tonight. So please do not wake me up. I would so appreciate that. Um, and then they didn't bug me the rest of the trip. I did feel like I was being watched one of the times because they had this place has gotten so popular, and it's kind of sad, but they have porta potties that they've started bringing out. That's how popular it's gotten. And I remember walking over to the porta potty with my dog, and he was being weird. He kept looking over at the brush. And I kept feeling like I was being watched. But other than that, I haven't had anything else happen. I don't think they have a malicious intent. I've never, besides that pushing into my tent that definitely shook me, but it startled me in the middle of the night, and I smelt that horrible smell. But other than that, I don't get scared, so I don't mind seeing them. Especially now that I've kind of broken that ice, I've already seen one. Um, but I don't know. I just want to learn more, I guess. It's such a beautiful thing to be honored with, I guess. You know, there's so many people that don't believe, don't have experiences, but yet I have had these experiences and I just feel very blessed for that. So, but when I left my offerings, I did not have anything left behind. And so I don't know for sure if it was them that took it. I don't know if it was another animal that ran off with it. I didn't find any kind of the dirt or things of that sort around. Like, for example, one of the times, the stump, nothing was kind of messed with, so I can't quite say. I didn't see prints or anything. Um, but I definitely would love to have more experiences. I wanted to go back there this summer, but it's hard because my friends can only have the weekends off and it gets too crowded. So I want to find different areas to go camping and have kind of start a new chapter in a way, if that makes sense. Yeah, be respectful, be kind, have lots of fun with it. Don't be scared, be open, and yeah, just go out and kind of either say it in your head or say it out loud, but just say a thank you. Say thank you for letting them allow you in their space. Don't go out, you know, guns a-blazing, playing loud music and being annoying. Nobody likes an annoying neighbor. Um, but just, you know, be open and you'll hopefully have a beautiful time.